so I wanted to do this video about HeroQuest and heroes specifically. We've had some awesome additions to the heroes from the base game: the elf, the barbarian, the dwarf and the wizard. Now we have the rogue, the monk, the knight, the druid, the warlock, the bard, the explorer, the berserker, and I think that's it for the official Avalon Hill releases. Let me know if I've missed anyone. But yeah, it's a nice amount, and sometimes less is more. However, I still think there's room for more heroes. Now, the problem with more heroes is you can get instances where characters will begin to have similar mechanics, and it can cause overlap where everyone just becomes the same. So the idea is to keep each character as unique as possible when it comes down to how they play. I think also how they look. I mean, I would rather not have every hero be human. I like the option of playing as elves or dwarves, gnomes. Other fantasy creatures would be great. I definitely think the option of playing as an ogre would be awesome. But I'd also like to see Avalon Hill have a try at doing some fantasy creatures we haven't yet seen in the setting. I would really love to see an ogre ninja. However, I've thought of a creature that would be much more suited for that role, being agile and sneaky. The kitsune from Japanese mythology I think would make a great ninja. But if not a kitsune, then definitely an ogre ninja. I just like the fun aspect of the idea of an ogre sneaking around and not being noisy and stomping everywhere. So I'd imagine the ninja having some kind of sneak ability, smoke bomb, and maybe poison attacks, or some sort of poison ranged attack, maybe some sort of blowpipe. Shurikens would be great, or throwing stars. A grapple hook would be useful for climbing, and obviously they'd be armed with a sai, much like Raphael from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Aesthetically, we could go with, like a typical human ninja, but we could also go with a kitsune, or maybe a small lizard man sort of character, like a skink from Warhammer, sort of kobold size, climbing up walls like one of those little agile lizards, or a frog. In D&D, there are like frog people called grongs. That would be brilliant for a ninja, being able to leap really far and climb on walls with those suction kind of hands and feet that lizards and frogs tend to have. I think as well both the grong and the kitsune would be perfect for Acrobat as well. Although you could go for a human Acrobat, so long as they look like Diana from the 80s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Their special abilities would be being able to jump over traps, a bit like the monk. I think like a double jump would be good, and a feather fall. You could even do rolls and cartwheels, so like you could roll through the legs of your opponent and then end up on the square behind them. Or you could do a cartwheel and it would negate an attack, let's say one, and move your player to any square in the room. And definitely like a whirlwind staff attack would be awesome. A duelist would be great. They would be like ambidextrous, dual wielding with a rapier sword and a sword breaker in the other hand, with a buckler shield strapped to their arm on their offhand. Let's not forget a cape, fancy hat, and all the other attributes that make up flouncy, foppish attire. Their special abilities would be sword breaker, which would disarm your opponent, so then they would only attack with an unarmed attack, which equates to 1 attack dice. Feint would be a good one, where you re-roll an attack and your opponent gets 1 less defense dice. Next would be a bounty hunter. I'd equip them with a crossbow and a dagger. and they would come with a small but fierce dog as a companion. The dog would come with special abilities, for example something like a nose for trouble, where Zargon must hint what is in a room before revealing it. So not reveal everything in the room, but a vague description of what might be in there, to signify the dog smelling what's beyond the door. I think also with the character being a bounty hunter, maybe a chance to draw a treasure card from the treasure deck after killing a monster or an opponent. Or maybe with each kill just roll a D100, and for example rolling a 1 would signify 10 gold coins, 2 would signify 20, 3 would signify 30, and so on. Maybe 6 would be nothing, as 60 gold coins might be a bit much, and sometimes you just gotta get nothing. Next up would be the ranger. I'd equip them with a longbow and a hand axe to fit with the woodland theme. The special abilities I'd give them would be strider, so they would negate hazardous terrain. Tracker would be able to reveal the contents in an unexplored room, and trapper can place traps and disarm traps, and maybe some kind of apothecary ability. Next is the fighter. I'd equip them with a mace or a morning star and a kite shield. They would start out with chainmail, and they would have the ability to move unhindered in heavy armor. I'd give them some kind of commander ability so they can buff mercenaries. Being veteran combatants, I'd also make them immune to fear spells, and of course they would be a weapons master and be able to wield any weapon without penalties. So if you want to equip a great weapon and a shield, you can with the fighter. This one was a suggestion in the comments of a post I made. Gladiator, or a pit fighter, sort of like a boxer, starts out with knuckle dusters. They get a special item, which is like a gauntlet blade or a spiked glove basically. They would get like a special combo attack, so they would roll 1d6 to determine the amount of combat dice they use in their turn, and it changes each time, so the amount of combos you get are randomized. And then as you level up, you use 2 6-sided dice to determine how much combo hits you get. And I got this mechanic from playing HeroQuest with Kurgan at XSC3, home of HeroQuest fans, here on YouTube and live on Twitch on Fridays and Saturdays. So yeah, check him out. We play a homebrew rule where if you get 3 shields in your attack, it acts as a wrestling move where it knocks off 1 body point. You could also do it as just like a counter punch, a nice jab or an uppercut. Next up would be the samurai. They have a danger of having some overlap with the Guardian Knight, but I think we could work in some mechanics to differentiate them a bit. I'd give them cards, sort of oath cards, give them special abilities that affect playstyle. Like one could be more defensive and the other could be more focused on like a more aggressive playstyle. Possibly a third one that's like more balanced, so it's like a bit of both. Armament wise, definitely the samurai should have the katana. Could also do a naginata, which is kind of like a polearm with almost like a katana blade on the end of it. Also, samurai did use early gunpowder weapons as well. I reckon maybe some people might not like the idea of gunpowder being in HeroQuest even. Some may like to keep it more sword and sorcery with a more medieval aesthetic. Yeah, it's fantasy, but it has to stay grounded a little bit. I think, for immersion purposes. And, you know, if you're homebrewing your own stuff, then, you know, sure, put in whatever you like. But that tangent aside, we're going on next to the Frier. Similar in a way to the way a cleric would play, but less combative, more about healing, maybe some alchemy type of abilities. For some reason, I think he should use wine that would work like potions, similar to like where you've got ones for healing and bravery, etc. Just seems fun and quite fitting to a character. I think Frier Tuck, they definitely should use a staff in combat. And I think, considering we're in the fantasy world and not constrained by any law of any type with regards to these things, such as gender specific roles or titles, I think a female Frier wouldn't be out of the question. For people that would like to play as a female version of the character or class, or you could even use a different title which fulfills the same role as a character, like a priestess or something. But anyway, the next one is pirate, and I'd equip them with a cutlass, maybe a flintlock pistol, definitely a macaw parrot. The parrot companion would have special cards with different abilities, like the parrot throws his voice and any of the monsters who hear it run to a square that the player chooses. So like they're standing guard and they'll all of a sudden hear a voice and go and investigate. Something like that. Could have one like go for the eyes, where you tell the parrot to attack an opponent of your choosing within your line of sight, and you'd roll one attack die, and if it's successful they get like a -1 to their attack or defense on their next turn, due to the fact that they can't see after getting their eyes scratched and pecked out by a parrot. The next one would be a Jester. I'd arm him with a dagger, and to differentiate them from the rogue, because at first I was thinking maybe he can throw the dagger, I was thinking why not a slingshot? It just seems like quite a mischievous weapon of choice and quite fitting for a Jester. He'd be a master of distraction, so I'd give him a taunt where he basically like does a silly face and sticks his tongue out, and any opponent of your choosing within your line of sight gets a -1 attack or defense. He'd do another one where he does a joke where they can restore up to 6 body points with the roll of a 6-sided dice, whereas he'd do a riddle and restores mind points with a 1d6. I'd give him another special where he could breathe fire, a bit like a yoga flame from Dalsim of Street Fighter, and I'd make that a 1-time per quest use. And Contortionist, which would be like a dodge ability. It would work similar to Twisting Torrent for the Wandering Monk. I was thinking a Dwarven Miner, but then I also thought about an engineer, and who better to be an engineer than a dwarf. So then I decided to combine them both and just have a dwarf engineer. They would have similar things to a miner, like explosives, some sort of wall breaker, which would be a similar ability to pass through rock. So for a weapon, considering he's both a miner and an engineer, I would give him a pickaxe, but with his engineer in mind, he would have a pickaxe with a built-in rifle barrel within the haft. And if that's too steampunk, then maybe a pickaxe that doubles as a crossbow. I mean, it's not at all functional, but it is fantasy, and we are dealing with one of the most innovative fantasy races in the dwarves. Speaking of that, the Dwarven Engineer would have a tinkering mechanic where they're able to buff weapons, adding a +1 attack to allies or even to your own weapon. But yeah, that's all the different classes that come to mind. I know Cleric and Paladin and some other classes that are out there, but I think I've covered some of their mechanics with some of the characters I've already picked. But in the original base game of HeroQuest, we have an elf and a dwarf, which aren't technically classes, they're races. So we could add some more races to the game, I think, as well, where obviously I mentioned playing as a kitsune or an ogre. I'd also like to play as maybe a Githyanki. I don't know if they're exclusively the IP of Dungeons and Dragons, but I like their overall aesthetic and their culture seems pretty awesome. Lizard men or lizard folk would also be cool. And definitely a centaur, I think, would fit HeroQuest really well. They could have, you know, a devastating charge attack, maybe arm them with some sort of scimitar, which is perfect for cavalry fighting. But yeah, just the ability to play as different fantasy races where maybe their game mechanics doesn't necessarily come from a class, but from a mechanic that's tied into their racial traits. So things like dark vision, or the ability to be amphibious, or, you know, things like being able to deal with the cold. Maybe we could get some form of hero with fur all over them, some kind of Bigfoot kind of Wookiee looking character who would be impervious to ice magic or frozen effects. I'm pretty sure after I upload this I'll be kicking myself thinking, why didn't I think of this class, character archetype or game mechanic? Even during the recording of this video, ideas came flooding into my head, so I'm sure there's more floating around in the void. Also, I'm sure some of the people watching this will mention a character or playable race I haven't thought of. It'd be cool to hear some of your ideas in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.